Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Nurul Ainsyahmimi binti Bah dari kelas DPE 3C. Saya nak cerita tentang heat exchanger. Heat exchanger is naturally flow from high temperature to lower temperature. Therefore, if a hot fluid and a cool fluid are separated by a heat conducting surface, heat can be transferred from the hot fluid to the cool fluid. Next, let mean temperature difference method. LMTD is used to determine the temperature driving force for heat transfer in flow system, most notably in heat exchanger. The average of the temperature difference between the hot and the cool feed at each end of the double pipe exchanger. For a given heat exchanger with constant area and heat transfer coefficient, the larger the LMTD, the more heat is transferred. The use of LMTD average straightforwardly from the analysis from a heat exchanger with constant flow rate and flow thermal properties. Okay, ini adalah formula untuk LMTD. Okay, next, number of transfer unit. NTU used to calculate the rate of the heat transfer in exchanger, especially current exchanger, when there is insufficient information to calculate the log mean temperature difference (LMTD). If the fluid inlet and outlet temperature can determine, the LMTD method can be used. When LMTD can use, the NTU method is used. The effectiveness NTU method is very useful of all the fluid arrangement beside parallel flow and counter flow ones, because the effectiveness of all other types must be obtained by numerical solution of the particular differential equation, and there is not analytical equation of LMTD or effectiveness, but as a function of two variables, the effectiveness for each type can be present in single diagram. Okay, next saya nak terangkan tentang working principle untuk shell and tube exchanger. One fluid flow inside the tube and the other through the shell. Will following the exchanger the heat switch mean the cool fluid gains the heat from the hot fluid. One fluid enter the shell or tube inside or channel inside inlet nozzle as hot fluid. The other fluid will become cool in the outlet, then inlet. The fluid flow inside the shell and tube heat exchanger can be parallel flow or cross flow. Okay, ini gambaran untuk shell and tube heat exchanger. Okay, next, instruction. In a shell and tube heat exchanger, the tube are mechanically attached to tube shell, which are contained inside a shell with part of inlet and outlet fluid and gas. In the latter design, an expansion below in use or one tube shell is allowed to float inside the shell. Okay, next component of shell and tube heat exchanger, kita ada tube side flow out, tube side flow in, shell side flow in, tube bundle, shell side flow out. Tube is basic component of shell and tube heat exchanger, providing the heat transfer surface between one fluid flowing inside the tube and the other fluid flowing across the outside of the tube. May be seamless or folded and most commonly made of copper or steel alloy. Other alloys of nickel, titanium, and aluminum may also be required for specific application. Seamless tubing is produced by rolling a shaft into a cylinder and welding the seam. Welding tubing is usually more economical. Next, tube shell. The tubes are held in place by being inserted two holes in the tube shell and heat it expand into grooves cut in the hole or welded the tube shell where the tube protrudes from the surface. Prevents the fluid on the shell inside from mixing with the fluid on the tube side. The tube shell is usually a single round plate of metal that has been silver grilled and grooved to take the tube in desired pattern, square or triangular. The gasket, the space and board circle wherein is fastened to the shell. Okay, next, shell and shell side nozzle. The shell is simple. The content of the shell side fluid and nozzle are the inlet and edge part. The shell normally is a circular cross section and commonly made by rolling a metal pellet of appropriate dimension into a cylinder and welding the longitudinal joint. Shell diameter. Small diameter shell can be made by cutting the pipe of the desired diameter to the correct length. The roundness of the shell is important in fixing the maximum diameter of the baffles that can be inside and therefore inflate the shell to baffles length. Next, the side channel and nozzle. Tube side channel and nozzle simply control the flow of the tube side fluid into and out of the tube of exchanger. Since the tube side fluid is generally more closed, the channels and nozzle will often be made out of alloy metals compatible with the tube and tube shell, of course. They may be clad instead of solid alloy. The channel ends are provided with channel covers. They are round barrel that board of the channel flanges and can be removed of tube inspection without disturbing the tube side piping. In smaller heat exchanger bonnet with flap nozzle and the threaded connection of the tube side piping are often used instead of channel and channel cover. Okay, next is baffles. Baffles is support the tube in proper position during assembly and operation and prevent vibration of the tube caused by flow-induced eddies. Guide the shell side flow back and forth across the tube field, increasing the velocity and heat transfer coefficient. Maintain the tube patching. Okay, the last is T-rod. T-rod and space are used for two reasons. First, hold the baffles assembly together. Second, maintain the selection baffles patching. Okay, the T-rods are Recruit add one end to the tube shell and add the other end to the last baffles. Hold the baffle assemble together. The space placed over the T-rods between such baffles to maintain the selection baffles pitch. The minimum number of T-rods and space depend on the diameter of the shell and the size of the T-rods and space. Okay, next is advantage and disadvantage of shell and tube exchanger. For advantage is number one is less space as compared to plate type cooler. Number two, can be used in system with high operation temperature and pressure. Number three, pressure drop across a tube cooler is less. Number four, tube legs are easily located and plug since pressure test is completed easily. Number five, turbulent cooler is refrigeration system can be acted as revised also. Number six, using spherical anode protect the wool cooling system against corrosion. Number seven, tube cooler may be prevented of lubricating oil cooling because of the pressure differentiation. And the advantage, number one is heat transfer. Fusion is less compared to pellet type cooler. Number two, cleaning and maintenance is difficult since a tube cooler requires enough cleanliness at one end to remove the tube nest. Number three, capacity of tube cooler cannot be increased. Number four, require more space in comparison to plate cooler. Okey, itu saja dari saya. Terima kasih.